On my 27th birthday, the room smelled like money. Crystal glasses, perfume, laughter that didn't belong to me. My grandfather lifted his champagne and smiled. "How do you spend your $400,000 trust fund, Evelyn?" The world tilted. I blinked once, twice. What trust fund? The fork stopped clinking. My mother's hand froze mid-gesture. My father's throat moved like he'd swallowed a stone. Then Grandpa turned calm as ever. Where did the money go? His question split the air open, and in that silence, under chandeliers and fake smiles, I realized this dinner wasn't a celebration. It was an execution. My name is Evelyn Hart, and until that night, I thought I understood my family. I grew up believing success was measured in silence. Smile at the table, don't ask too many questions, and never talk about money. I lived in San Francisco now, far from their marble floors and polished cars, working as a freelance designer out of a small apartment in the Mission District. The walls peeled, the pipes hissed, but it was mine. I'd spend nights sketching logos while the city hummed outside coffee cooling beside overdue bills. My parents, James and Victoria, lived 20 minutes away in Marin County, 4 bedrooms, a pool, a Tesla for each. We talked, but never about real things. Calls began with "how's work" and ended before I could answer. The last time they'd surprised me was at my college graduation. I'd walked the stage holding $70,000 in student loans and a diploma I'd earned alone. They hugged me, handed me a wrapped box, and said, "We're so proud." Inside was a hardcover book, Financial Literacy for Young Adults. I smiled for the photos. That night I cried over the sink, realizing they hadn't planned to help. Still, I kept my head down. I paid rent, skipped dinners, took every freelance job I could find. When friends posted vacation photos, I laughed it off. One day I'd say, one day I'd make enough to breathe. A week before my 27th birthday, my boss called me into his glass office. His face said everything before he spoke. "I'm sorry, Evelyn, we're downsizing." I boxed up my things, took the bus home, and sat on my couch with Madison, my roommate, my anchor, my only constant for 2 years. "Your parents will help, right?" she asked. I laughed, bitter and hollow. "They'll probably suggest a budgeting app." That night I called anyway. "Mom, I lost my job." "Oh, that's too bad, honey," she said, her keyboard clicking in the background. "But you'll figure it out. You always do." "I'm behind on rent, Mom. I don't know how." "Well, maybe this will teach you to save better. Anyway, we're making reservations for your birthday dinner, Atelier Cren, 7:30. Don't be late. Mom, that place is $300 a plate." She laughed. "Don't be cheap, Evelyn. It's your birthday. Dress nicely." The line went dead before I could say goodbye. I stared at my reflection in the dark TV screen, tired eyes, split ends, lipstick fading. $300 a plate, I whispered. "That's half my grocery budget." Madison looked up from the couch. "You don't have to go." "Yeah, I do. In my family, skipping dinner is worse than blasphemy." So I circled the date on the calendar the way people mark the day they'll face a firing squad. The week dragged toward my birthday like a slow leak. I tried to stay busy sending resumes, updating my portfolio, but rejection emails piled up faster than I could open them. My savings account dipped under 4 digits. Every noise from the hallway made me flinch, half expecting the landlord's knock. By Friday, I'd stopped sleeping. Madison found me at 2 a.m., still hunched over my laptop. "Eve, go to bed," she said softly. "I can't. If I stop, I'll think about it." "About what?" "That dinner. Them. Acting like everything's perfect while I'm falling apart." She squeezed my shoulder. "Then make it the last time they treat you like that." I didn't know what she meant yet, but those words stayed. Saturday came bright and sharp. I stood in front of my closet staring at the same 3 options. Jeans too faded, a blazer missing a button, and a black dress I'd bought 3 years ago for a job interview. I chose the dress. It still fit mostly. On the bus ride to the restaurant, I watched people through the window, tourists laughing, couples holding hands, a kid licking ice cream that dripped down his arm. I envied how simple their moments were. Atelier Cren shimmered with glass and gold. My parents were already seated when I arrived, my mother in a red silk dress, my father in his tailored navy suit. The table gleamed with wine glasses and silverware I couldn't name. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." Mom air-kissed me, her perfume so strong it made my eyes sting. Dad smiled. "You look tired. Rough week." "Lost my job," I said quietly. He nodded like I'd mentioned the weather. "Well, that happens. You'll bounce back." They launched into stories about their Europe trip, the new Tesla's autopilot feature, a renovation project for the guest bathroom. My words dissolved in the noise. I kept glancing at the door, counting the minutes. I was supposed to feel celebrated, but I felt like a prop in their perfect picture. Then the door opened. A ripple of surprise swept the room as my grandfather walked in. Robert Hart, silver-haired, tall, every step measured. The maitre d' nearly tripped, trying to escort him. My mother's smile faltered. "Dad, what are you doing here?" she asked, voice an octave too high. "Celebrating my granddaughter, of course." His eyes found mine. "Happy birthday, Evelyn." He hugged me real solid warm, and I felt the first breath I'd taken all night. "I didn't know you were coming," I said. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." He sat down beside me, ordered whiskey neat, and started polite conversation. But there was an edge in his voice I couldn't place, like he already knew something none of us did. Then he smiled at me, raised his glass, and said the words that changed everything. The whiskey caught the light as my grandfather lifted his glass. "So, Evelyn," he said tone casual, "how do you spend your $3.4 million trust fund?" The air shattered. I heard my heartbeat before the silence registered. I blinked. Once? Twice? What trust fund? Every fork stopped mid-air. My mother's smile cracked like porcelain. My father's throat moved as if he'd swallowed glass. My grandfather's expression didn't change. He simply leaned back in his chair. "The trust I set up when you were born. Your parents were supposed to transfer it to you when you turned 25. My mother laughed too fast. "Oh, Dad, you must be mistaken." "There was Victoria," he said quietly. "Don't." It was the first time in my life I'd seen her go still. He turned to the waiter. "Private room, please." Within minutes, we were ushered away, plates half-eaten, champagne forgotten. The door closed behind us with a soft click that sounded final. Inside, the air was colder. My grandfather's assistant, Michelle, was already there, tablet open. A man in a tailored suit waited beside her. Michael Anderson, his attorney. "This won't take long," Grandpa said. "I just want clarity." Michael opened a folder, slid a stack of papers across the table. "Miss Hart, this is the trust account created under your name. Initial deposit, $1 million. Current value, given market growth, should be approximately $3.4 million. My fingers hovered above the paper. "Should be." He nodded grimly. "As of this morning, the balance is $200,000. The words landed like a physical hit. $200,000. 25 years of savings investments, interest gone. Grandpa's gaze never left my parents. "Explain." Dad wiped his forehead. We used some of it, just to cover the mortgage when the market crashed." Grandpa's voice stayed calm. "That's over $3 million, James." Mom's hands trembled around her clutch. "We were managing it. For her future. We didn't want her to waste it." I laughed, short, sharp, ugly. "You mean like wasting it on rent or student loans or food?" Mom turned to me, her eyes glassy. "Sweetheart, we only wanted what's best for you. You gave me a book on financial literacy for graduation." My voice cracked. "While you were draining my account." Grandpa raised a hand. The room went quiet again. "Enough." He turned to Michelle. "List the withdrawals." She read, her voice mechanical. "Mortgage payoff, $450,000. Vehicle purchases, 2 Tesla Model S, $280,000. Home renovation, $320,000. Investment in Victoria Hart Real Estate, $500,000. Marked total loss." Each line felt like another blow. Then she paused. "Purchase of property in Malibu, $1.8 million. Currently registered under James and Victoria Hart." I stared at them. A beach house. My father's face went slack. "It was an investment. It was theft," Grandpa said quietly, "from your own daughter." No one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the air vent. Finally, Grandpa pushed back his chair. "Give me the keys." Mom's eyes darted toward her purse. She hesitated, then pulled out a small key ring, 2 keys and a fob. Her hands shook as she set them on the table. Grandpa slid them across to me. "These are yours, 2 years late." They were still warm from her palm when I picked them up. My keys, my apartment, my life that had been kept from me. Mom started to cry soft, practiced sobs. "Please, Dad, don't do this. We're family. Family doesn't steal from family," he said. "You'll hear from my lawyers tomorrow." They left the room slowly as if gravity had doubled. The door closed and the air felt lighter but emptier. Grandpa turned to me. "Evelyn, I'll have a full audit done. They'll face legal consequences. But the decision to press charges, it's yours." I looked down at the keys, metal cold against my skin. For years, I'd begged for scraps of approval. Now I held proof that their love had a price tag. "I need time," I whispered. "Take it," he said. But know this, they were planning to run. Michelle found tickets to Costa Rica bought 3 days ago. My chest tightened. They came to dinner knowing this was goodbye. He nodded, and they smiled while doing it. That night, I left the restaurant with the keys in my pocket and a storm in my chest. Outside, the city lights blurred through the fog. Madison was waiting up when I got home. When I told her everything, she stared at me like I just recited a crime scene report. "They stole from you," she whispered. "Your own parents. Not just money," I said. "Years." I looked out the window at the sleeping city and felt something break and something else begin. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to take everything back, quietly. 3 days after that dinner, I was summoned to my grandfather's office, a glass tower downtown that looked like it could slice the sky. I barely slept since the night of the reveal. The words, "They were planning to run," played on loop in my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's trembling hand dropping the keys. My father's silence that felt like confession. When I arrived, Michelle was already waiting in the lobby, immaculate as always, tablet in hand. "They're here," she said quietly. "Robert wanted you present." My stomach tightened. "Both of them." She nodded. "They came to negotiate." Negotiate. That word tasted wrong. The elevator opened to the top floor, glass walls, leather chairs, the faint scent of cedar and old money. Grandpa sat behind his desk posture, straight hands clasped. Across from him sat my parents. Dad looked 10 years older. Mom was trying to smile, but the gloss on her lips cracked at the corners. Evelyn Grandpa said, voice steady, "Sit." I sat opposite them. No one spoke for a moment. The only sound was the ticking of the antique clock on the wall. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "We didn't mean for it to go this far. We were just..." Desperate Grandpa's voice was cold. "Trying to stay afloat," Dad said. "You wouldn't understand. I understand, greed," Grandpa interrupted. "I built an empire on recognizing it." Mom reached forward, tears already in her eyes. "We love her, Dad. We were going to tell her eventually, when after you finish selling the Malibu house Silence." Michael Anderson, the attorney, stepped forward, setting a stack of printed bank statements on the desk. "The forensic audit is complete," he said. "Every transaction traced, every property connected. We've recovered approximately $2 million through asset seizures and forced sales." My father rubbed his temples. $2 million? We already... "You didn't recover it," Michael said sharply. "We did, through the law." I watched the scene from what felt like outside my own body. Every lie peeled away, every secret dragged into the light. Michelle handed me a folder. Inside were photos of my parents' purchases. The Malibu property, luxury cars, jewelry receipts, cruise bookings, all funded by my trust. "You should know what they valued more than you," she said softly. I swallowed hard. "This is enough to press criminal charges, isn't it?" "Yes," Michael replied. "Felony financial fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. Up to 10 years. Mom gasped. "Evelyn, you wouldn't please." Her voice broke like a child's, but I didn't flinch. "I didn't do this," I said. "You did." My father leaned forward, desperation bleeding through the calm facade. "We made mistakes, but prison. We're your parents." "Parents protect," I said quietly. "They don't pillage." Grandpa turned to me. "It's your choice, sweetheart." The room blurred around me, the skyline behind glass, the papers, the trembling hands across the desk. I thought of 27 years of dinners where I smiled through silence, of student loans I'd paid with ramen and overtime, of birthdays where they sent flowers but not love. I met my mother's eyes. "You left me with nothing. Now you have exactly that." The words landed like thunder. Mom's shoulders collapsed. Dad looked away, jaw clenched. Grandpa nodded once to Michael. File the necessary motions. Mom reached across the table, voice shaking. Dad, please, she's your granddaughter, and you are my daughter, he said. But there's a difference between blood and character. She began to sob real this time. It wasn't for me. It was for everything they were losing. As the lawyers finalized the papers, I stood and walked to the window. The city stretched below, cranes, cars, the slow pulse of people living their lives. I pressed my hand to the glass, the cold grounding me. For the first time in years, I wasn't small. Behind me, I heard Grandpa say, "Keys, deeds, accounts all transferred back to Evelyn, effective immediately." When I turned, Michelle handed me a slim envelope. "These are your property documents. Pacific Heights fully under your name now." I nodded. "Thank you." Mom whispered something, her voice barely audible. "You'll regret this." I looked at her, really looked. The woman who taught me to keep my voice soft, my needs smaller, my worth tied to approval. "No," I said. "For once I won't." They left soon after, escorted out by security. The door closed. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean. Grandpa stood slowly, walking over to me. "You did the right thing." "I don't feel good," I admitted. "Justice rarely feels good," he said, "but it's necessary." He put a hand on my shoulder, firm and steady. "You're not alone anymore, Evelyn. You never were." That night I went to see the apartment, the one I'd never been allowed to step inside. Pacific Heights was quiet, all glass and steel and bay views. The doorman recognized my name immediately. "Mr. Hart said you'd be coming." When I unlocked the door, the smell of expensive candles hit me first. Everything was staged neutral tones, marble counters, a coffee table book about modern design. A stranger's life furnished with my money. I wandered through the rooms, fingertips brushing the walls, the furniture, the evidence. On the counter, a lease folder, tenants' names, rent deposits. My parents had been collecting money for years. I sank onto the couch and laughed, the sound raw. Then the laughter broke into tears. Not grief anymore, but release. Madison arrived 20 minutes later, holding takeout. "You're really here," she whispered, eyes wide. "I'm home," I said. She looked around, smiled. "So, how does justice feel?" "Quiet," I said, "and heavier than I thought." We ate sitting on the floor cartons, spread out like old times. Through the windows, the bay shimmered with city lights. Somewhere behind me, the keys gleamed on the counter, a reminder of everything that had been stolen and everything I'd taken back. Before bed, I texted Grandpa, moved in. "Thank you for fighting when I couldn't." His reply came a minute later. "You always could, Evelyn. You just needed proof." I stared at that message until the screen dimmed, proof of what they'd done and who I'd become. A month passed before I could sleep without waking in the middle of the night expecting another secret to surface. But the investigation moved quickly. My parents' assets, both Tesla's, the Malibu house, even the country club membership, were liquidated. The proceeds poured back into my account under my name where they should have always been. They moved into a roadside motel in Oakland. Grandpa told me in a quiet voice, "They're paying restitution. $500 a month." Court ordered. I didn't feel joy when he said it, just balance. I settled into the apartment in Pacific Heights. Each morning the fog rolled over the bay like breath. I'd sit on the balcony with coffee laptop open, freelancing again. Clients came, fast referrals from Grandpa's network startups that needed branding. For once I wasn't scrambling, I was building. Madison came over every weekend. We hung art, unpacked boxes, made the place ours. "You realize," she said once, laughing, "you could buy this whole building now." "I don't want to own more things," I said. "Just more peace." Weeks turned into months. My name was on everything now, bank accounts, titles, deeds. But it wasn't the money that settled me. It was the ownership of my life. One evening, Grandpa invited me to dinner. He looked frailer but lighter, as if some weight had lifted. "You did what I couldn't," he told me. "You drew a line." I smiled. "You taught me how." That night, driving home through the city, I passed the restaurant where it all began. Through the glass, people were laughing, toasting, unaware of how fast a family can fracture over greed. I didn't stop. Some chapters deserved to stay closed. Finally, I learned that blood doesn't always mean loyalty. My parents stole my future and called it love, but I took it back piece by piece, quietly, legally, completely. Now, when I look out over the bay, I don't see what I lost. I see what I rebuilt. If you've ever been betrayed by the people you trusted most, remember this: you can still start over stronger than before. And if stories like mine hit close to home, stay with me. The next one might sound uncomfortably familiar. Hit subscribe and don't look away.
My name is Viola Blake, and when I was 28, I learned that love can destroy you quietly long before it breaks you loudly. Back then, I was a mid-level analyst at a consulting firm in a mid-sized city. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave me stability. I used to think that being stable was a good thing, something a man would value. I was wrong. I met Jacob in college. He was magnetic in that effortless way, always chasing new ideas, always sure he was destined for more. When he looked at me, I felt seen, like I'd been chosen from the crowd. We dated through graduation, through his early jobs that came and went like weather through every big idea that would surely make him successful this time. He was the dreamer, I was the anchor. And anchors don't move, they hold everything steady even as the storm batters them. 5 years in, I'd turned down a relocation offer that could have doubled my income. Jacob had said, "We need to build our life here first. You can chase the fancy stuff later." I believed him. I told myself that love meant teamwork. I paid the rent when his consulting startup folded. I covered groceries, even his credit card bill a few times. It's temporary, I'd say, though deep down I wasn't sure. He called me his safe place, and I wore that like a medal until it started sounding like a cage. It happened slowly, first the teasing, then the subtle dismissals. "You're so routine, Viola," he'd laugh, scrolling through Instagram. "Look at people actually living. Don't you ever get bored of spreadsheets and meal prep?" I'd smile it off, but every laugh carved something out of me. Then came the late nights, networking events that didn't end till 2 a.m. Phones flipped screen down messages he wouldn't explain. I told myself not to be paranoid. That's what love does. It excuses what logic would condemn. One Thursday night, I came home early with takeout and wine. I wanted to surprise him, to talk, maybe bridge the quiet distance that had settled between us. The lights were dim. His coat was on the hook. And from the bedroom came laughter, a woman's laughter. My fingers went numb. I remember walking, not running, as if slowness could change what I was about to see. When I pushed the door open, the world froze. Jacob was there, bare skin, tangled sheets, and a stranger beside him. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then he had the nerve to look irritated. "Viola, what are you doing home so early?" As if I had done something wrong. I couldn't speak at first. Just a whisper. "What's going on?" He sighed, exasperated, like explaining a simple math problem. "Okay, fine. You caught me. But let's be real, this has been coming for a while." The girl later I'd learn her name was. Melissa smirked and started dressing without shame. She brushed past me with a half laugh. "Guess I'll leave you two to talk." When the door closed behind her, Jacob sat on the edge of the bed, completely unbothered. "Viola, you've changed. You've become so predictable. You don't challenge me anymore. Melissa gets it. She's ambitious, fiery. You've gotten comfortable. Comfortable. As if love should always feel like a chase instead of a choice." "So you're cheating because I'm not exciting enough," I managed. He shrugged. "You're safe, but I need more than safe. I need a woman who pushes me forward, not one who holds me down." I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand how paying his bills and believing in him was holding him down. But all I said was, "If that's what you need, Jacob, then go find it." He blinked, surprised. "That's it. No drama, no begging." I shook my head, my voice steady even as my heart cracked. "No. You already made your choice. I'm just stepping out of your way." He scoffed, pulling on a shirt. "You'll regret this. You'll never find someone who loves you like I did." I looked at him, then really looked, and realized I never wanted to be loved like that again. When the door shut behind me, the night air hit my face like ice. My hands were trembling, my chest hollow. But beneath the pain was something else, an ember of clarity. For years, I'd built my world around a man who believed love was a competition he needed to win. That night, I stopped competing. I didn't know it yet, but walking away from him wasn't the end of the story. It was the quiet beginning of the woman I was about to become. The night I left Jacob, I didn't have a plan. Just a duffel bag, a drained bank account, and the dull echo of his words, "You're not enough." I spent that first night on my friend Maya's couch, staring at the ceiling until morning bled through the blinds. I kept hearing the laughter from that bedroom, her laugh Melissa's haunting and smug. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation, the kind that stains your reflection for weeks. Maya found me in the kitchen around sunrise, clutching a cold cup of tea, like it could anchor me. "You need to eat something," she said softly. I shook my head. "I just need to forget." But forgetting never starts that easily. In the days that followed, I moved mechanically. I terminated the lease, forwarded. Jacob's mail blocked his number, deleted our photos. But no matter how many things I erased, memories still clung like smoke. The way he once smiled when I said something nerdy, the way I'd believed every promise he made. A week later, I stood in the middle of my new apartment, a tiny studio, overlooking a cracked parking lot, and let the silence wrap around me. For the first time in years, it was my space. Mine. It smelled like dust and cardboard boxes, but I could breathe. I made lists. It's what I do when life collapses. List gave me the illusion of control. Cancel shared bank account. Call HR about relocation. Buy curtains. Don't cry. But I cried anyway sometimes over nothing. The sound of his old playlist, a mug he left behind, the smell of his cologne on my jacket. The grief wasn't for him, not really. It was for the version of me who believed stability could buy love. Weeks blurred together. I went to work, smiled politely, and lied when people asked if I was okay. At night, I journaled. My first entry was simple. He called me safe. Maybe safety isn't weakness. Maybe it's the start. Somewhere between the sleepless nights and quiet mornings, I began to change. I reactivated my gym membership, the same one I'd canceled when Jacob said we needed to cut costs. The first day back, I nearly quit after 10 minutes on the treadmill. But as sweat dripped down my face, something shifted. The rhythm of my breath reminded me that I still existed beyond heartbreak. Then a miracle disguised as an email arrived, a job posting from a firm in Riverside, a nearby city. The same position I'd once turned down for him, only now the role was higher senior analyst. The irony made me laugh. That night, I updated my resume for the first time in 3 years. 2 weeks later, they called. I nailed the interview. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the new steel in my voice. But I spoke like a woman who had stopped apologizing for wanting more. When the offer letter arrived, I printed it out and pinned it to my fridge. A small victory, but it felt monumental. Maya came over with cheap champagne to celebrate. To fresh starts, she toasted. I clinked my glass weakly. Fresh starts built from ashes. She smiled. Even ashes can bloom if you let them. That night, I unpacked my last box of photo album from college. I flipped through our old pictures, Jacob and I smiling, young and certain. For the first time, I didn't cry. I simply closed the book and placed it on the highest shelf out of reach. Then I walked to the window. The city lights shimmered below, and somewhere in that noise, I heard my own quiet pulse again. "Maybe I'm not too safe," I whispered. "Maybe I'm just steady enough to rebuild." I didn't know it then, but that calm acceptance was dangerous for him. Because peace, once found, is something no manipulator can take back. By the time autumn rolled around, I had begun to live again. The kind of living that didn't revolve around someone else's chaos. Mornings meant coffee by the window gym before work, new projects that actually challenged me. No more tiptoeing around fragile egos. I'd been in Riverside for nearly 4 months when the first whisper of Jacob reached me. It came through, Maya casually dropped, during brunch. "Did you hear?" she asked, stirring her latte. "Jacob's all over social media again. New business, new girlfriend. Looks like he's doing great." I almost laughed. Of course he was. People like Jacob always look like they're doing great until the cracks start showing. Still that night, I found myself scrolling through his public page, curiosity, winning over caution. There he was, smiling, wide arms slung around a woman in a sleek red dress. Melissa. The caption read, "Big dreams, bigger moves. Hashtag power couple." The comment section was full of heart emojis and words like inspirational. It should have hurt, but it didn't. It just looked fake, too bright, too curated. Behind that filtered glow, I could almost hear the strain in his smile. Over the next few weeks, I heard more snippets from mutual acquaintances. Jacob and Melissa started a startup consulting thing. Apparently, they're killing it. They hosted this big networking event downtown. She calls him her visionary. I would nod, say something neutral, and change the subject. But late at night, lying in bed, I'd wonder, did he ever look at me that way? Or had I always just been the quiet foundation beneath his ambition? Then, about 2 months later, everything changed again. It started with a text from Maya at 7 a.m. Girl, you dodged a bomb. Jacob's business is a scam. I frowned, blinking at the screen. What? A flurry of messages followed. Apparently, Jacob's company, his so-called consulting agency, wasn't legitimate at all. He and Melissa had been taking investments for an app that never existed. Fancy networking parties, borrowed cars, empty promises. The illusion had finally collapsed. One of his ex-colleagues leaked the truth online. By noon, the comments under his posts had turned from praise to mockery. Where's the app Jacob refund the investors? Guess being a visionary doesn't pay the rent. The digital downfall spread fast. And in that mess, someone mentioned Melissa had vanished, deleted her accounts, disappeared overnight. Apparently, she'd drained their joint account and taken off. Jacob was left with debt, legal threats, and a reputation in ruins. When I read that, I didn't feel triumph, just silence. Poetic silence. I remembered that night he'd said I wasn't woman enough for his needs, how he'd praised her fire and ambition. Now his fire had burned him alive. A few days later, a coworker showed me a clip from a local news snippet about fraudulent investment startups. Jacob's name wasn't mentioned directly, but I saw enough to know it was him. My stomach twisted, not with pity, but something colder. Karma isn't loud. It's patient. That night, I sat on my balcony again, watching the city lights flicker. The same balcony where I'd toasted to fresh starts. I whispered to the wind, "You wanted excitement, Jacob. I hope you found it." Then I closed my laptop, poured myself a glass of wine, and went to bed. I slept soundly for the first time in weeks, because for the first time I realized his chaos was no longer my burden to carry. And his fall wasn't my revenge. It was simply his consequence. Little did I know karma wasn't done yet. He was about to come knocking on my peace. It started on a quiet Sunday night, the kind of peace you don't notice until it's interrupted. I'd just returned from a hike, my phone tucked away on the counter while I made tea. When I finally checked it, there it was. Jacob, hey Viola. Been thinking about you. Can we talk? I stared at the screen. My pulse didn't quicken. It barely moved. 6 months ago, that message would have shattered me. Now it just felt like an echo from another life. I didn't reply. 2 days later, another ping. Jacob. I know I don't deserve a response, but please just hear me out. Melissa scammed me. She disappeared. I lost everything. I read it twice, then locked my phone. It wasn't anger, I felt it was something emptier, detached, like watching a movie I'd already seen. By the end of the week, the messages multiplied. I made a mistake. You were right about her. You were always the real one, Viola. It was almost comical. The same man who told me I wasn't woman enough for his needs now missed my stability, my calm, my boring. I kept deleting his messages until one night, after 3 missed calls, I listened to a voicemail. His voice cracked between breaths. Viola, I don't even know where to start. Melissa ruined me. She took my savings, my car, my reputation. Everyone's gone. You're the only one who ever cared. Please, I need someone who understands. For a moment, I could hear the old Jacob, the one I'd once protected from the world. Then I remembered the way he'd looked at me that night. The smug pity. You hold me back. I deleted the voicemail. A few days later, my phone buzzed again. This time a video call request. I declined it immediately. But curiosity made me peek at his social media, and what I saw made my chest tighten, not from sympathy, but recognition. He looked hollow. The man who once chased light now sat in darkness. The apartment behind him was bare, the walls empty, every ounce of charm stripped away. For a second I almost pitied him. Almost. That evening, I received another message. Please just coffee. No drama. I just want to talk. I typed a single line back. No need, Jacob. I wish you well. Then I blocked his number again. I thought that was the end. But endings, I've learned, rarely come when you want them to. A week later, there was a knock at my door, sharp, persistent. Through the peephole, I saw him. Jacob. My breath caught. For a second, I thought maybe he'd changed, that life had humbled him. But the moment he lifted his head, I saw it, that same entitlement just wrapped in exhaustion. I opened the door, a few inches chain still on. Why are you here? His eyes were sunken, voice trembling. I just need to explain, Melissa. She lied about everything. She used me. I thought I was doing the right thing, chasing my dream. But I lost everything, Viola. You're the only one who ever... I cut him off. Stop. He blinked, startled. Don't rewrite history. You didn't lose everything because of her. You lost everything because you refused to see what you already had. He swallowed hard, guilt flickering for just a second before the old defensiveness returned. You don't understand. I was under pressure. I wanted us to have more. You wanted excitement, I said quietly. And you got it. Silence stretched. For a moment, the weight of it almost made me feel sorry for him. Then he leaned closer to the door, eyes desperate. You're really just going to stand there after everything we've been through? Yes, I said, because I finally learned that standing still isn't weakness, it's peace. He flinched. Then bitterly. You're cold now. I thought you were different. I almost smiled. I am. That's the point. He stared a moment longer, then stepped back. His voice softened. You'll regret this. No, I said. I already did my regretting. When he left the hallway, fell silent again. I closed the door, leaned against it, and exhaled. No tears, no shaking hands, just relief. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't triumph. It was closure knocking, and me choosing not to open the door. 3 months passed after that night. 3 months of peace so steady it almost scared me. No messages, no surprises, just work quiet evenings and the kind of calm that feels earned. Then, one Friday morning, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. It was an email from a mediator. Ms. Blake, we've scheduled your appointment to finalize the joint account and lease settlement with Mr. Jacobs. My chest tightened. I'd almost forgotten that our old apartment lease and savings account were still legally tangled. I'd avoided the paperwork because dealing with him again felt like reopening an old wound. But now it was unavoidable. The meeting was set for Monday morning at a neutral office downtown. I told myself it would be simple sign papers, close the chapter, walk away. Still, that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying all the versions of me he'd left behind, the girl who believed love meant sacrifice, the woman who cried over an empty bed, the one who nearly mistook survival for strength. They were all ghosts now, and I was finally ready to bury them. Monday. The sky was gray, the kind of muted color that feels like foreshadowing. I arrived early, documents neatly organized in a folder. My new self was punctual, professional, unshakable. Then he walked in. Jacob. He looked smaller somehow. His posture slouched. Hair unkempt, clothes wrinkled. He wasn't the man who once lectured me about ambition. Behind him, an older woman followed briskly. I recognized her from old photos, his mother. The mediator greeted us politely, but before we sat, Jacob spoke. Viola, can we talk privately? Just for a second. His voice was hesitant, cracked around the edges. I didn't answer. The mediator gestured toward the table. Let's begin. As we reviewed the documents, his mother started speaking. Instead, her tone sharp, defensive, the way mothers do when protecting pride. You know, dear Jacob's been through a lot. That woman, Melissa, she ruined him. He's been trying to rebuild, but it's been hard. It would mean a lot if you two could make peace. I kept my eyes on the papers. That's what we're doing, legally. She frowned. No, I mean emotionally. You two had something real. You were good for him. He lost his way. Jacob looked at me, then eyes glistening with that practiced sorrow I'd once mistaken for sincerity. Viola, please. I see everything now. You were the real thing. Melissa used me, turned me into someone I'm not. You always believed in me. We can start again. I took a breath, steady and calm. Jacob, I believed in who you could become, not the man you chose to be. He leaned forward, desperate. People make mistakes. You're stronger than this bitterness. You used to say you didn't give up on people. That was before I realized not everyone deserves a second chance, I said softly. His mother huffed. Forgiveness is what good women do. Don't let pride ruin your heart. That word, good women, hit like a sour taste. For years I'd tried to be that quiet patient, endlessly forgiving. Not anymore. I met her gaze and smiled politely. Then maybe I was never meant to be a good woman. Maybe I was meant to be a whole one. Silence. The mediator cleared his throat. Let's continue with the signatures. I signed my name slow and deliberate. When it was his turn, Jacob's hand trembled. As he passed me the final form, he whispered, Viola, please, don't walk away like this. I still love you. I looked at him one last time. Jacob, remember the night you told me I wasn't woman enough for your needs? His face fell. I didn't mean that. I was angry. I did, I interrupted. Because that night you were right. I wasn't woman enough for you. But I've become woman enough for myself. I stood, gathered my papers, and nodded to the mediator. We're done here. As I walked out, his mother muttered something about cruelty, about men making mistakes. But I didn't turn back. Outside, the air was cold, sharp, and clean. Every breath tasted like freedom. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need validation. The real victory was walking out of that office without a single piece of me left behind. And for the first time in years, I smiled not because I was moving on from him, but because I'd finally returned to myself. 6 months later, if you had told me I'd wake up every morning with peace instead of panic, I wouldn't have believed you. But there I was, standing barefoot on my small balcony, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over Riverside, and for once I didn't feel like something was missing. My life wasn't extraordinary by anyone's standards. I worked. I hiked on weekends. I started learning how to paint, again a hobby I'd abandoned, because Jacob once joked that it was too simple. Now my apartment walls bloomed with imperfect brushstrokes and color. It wasn't perfect, neither was I. But it was real. Sometimes I still thought of him. Not often, not painfully, just as a flicker of memory when a familiar song came on, or when I passed a cafe we used to go to. But instead of anger, there was gratitude, because if he hadn't broken me, I would have never learned how to rebuild. I'd even started dating again. His name was Liam, a quiet architect with patient eyes and a laugh that didn't need to be loud to be kind. We met at a charity event my firm sponsored. He asked me questions, not to impress, not to compare, but to listen. It felt foreign, the gentleness of it, the absence of competition. One evening, while we walked by the river, he asked softly, "Do you ever regret it?" The way things ended, I smiled. "No, I regret staying too long, not leaving sooner." He nodded, understanding. No probing, no fixing, just presence. And for the first time, I realized love didn't have to feel like survival. There was one moment that stayed with me. A few weeks later, I stopped by a bookstore near downtown and ran into an old mutual friend. She hesitated, then said, "Did you hear about Jacob?" I shook my head. He left town, filed for bankruptcy. His mom's been trying to sell the old house. For a second, I felt that familiar ache of memory, but it faded almost instantly. "Thanks for telling me," I said simply. As I walked home, the world around me felt brighter somehow, not because he was gone, but because I no longer needed to care. That night, I stood before my bathroom mirror, brushing my hair, and caught my reflection in the warm light. There she was, the woman who had once cried over being not enough. Now her eyes were steady, clear, whole. I thought about everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. Peace instead of performance, solitude instead of chaos, and the quiet truth that no one could ever again define my worth. Before bed, I opened my journal, the same one that once held pages of heartbreak. This time, I wrote just one line. He said I wasn't woman enough, but maybe I was never meant to be woman enough for him, only for myself. I closed the notebook, turned off the lamp, and lay there listening to the hum of the city below. Outside, the world moved on. Inside, I finally had to. My name is Maya Konatzer, and I'm 28 years old. If you ask anyone who knows me, they'll probably describe me as steady. Not flashy, not wild, just reliable. I used to think that was a compliment. I've never been the kind of woman people post about online, no spontaneous road trips or rooftop parties. My days were simple. Wake up early, work long hours at my marketing job, cook dinner, save money, plan for a future that felt safe. Predictable, maybe, but it gave me peace. When I met Timothy Parker, everything changed. He was charming, magnetic, the kind of man who made even ordinary moments feel cinematic. He said I grounded him, that my calm steadiness balanced out his impulsive side. He once told me, "You're the only person who makes me want to slow down." Back then, I thought that meant forever. At first, we were perfect in our differences. I handled the bills, packed his lunch, when he forgot left notes in his jacket pocket. He made me laugh, dragged me into spontaneous weekend plans, taught me to try new things. I loved that about him, his energy, his confidence, his way of turning everything into a story. But somewhere along the way, his admiration turned into mockery. It started small. "You never want to do anything fun anymore," he'd tease, scrolling through Instagram. "All your friends are out living, and you're here, meal prepping." I'd laugh it off, pretending it didn't sting. "I just like things planned," I'd say. "Planned," he'd repeat, smirking. That's such a Maya word. He'd say things like that when his friends were around, light jabs that didn't sound cruel until you heard the laughter that followed. Once during a dinner with his coworkers, a woman joked about her crazy weekend in Bali. Timothy grinned and said, "Don't mind Maya, she's basically a 50-year-old trapped in a 28-year-old's body. Her idea of fun is reorganizing a spreadsheet." Everyone laughed. I did too. But inside I felt something break. That night, lying next to him, I stared at the ceiling. His breathing was calm, already asleep. I whispered softly, "Why is being dependable suddenly a flaw?" He didn't answer, and maybe that silence said everything. The tension grew invisible, but suffocating. Every time he compared me to someone else, someone more exciting, more passionate, I felt myself shrinking. Still, I convinced myself it was just a phase. We'd been together for 3 years. I'd seen him through failed startups, layoffs, and late-night breakdowns. Surely he wouldn't just turn cruel. Then came that night. It was past 9 p.m. I'd just finished an exhausting client call. When I opened the door, Timothy was sitting in the living room, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand. He didn't even look up. "You know what your problem is," he said, voice low but sharp. I set my bag down slowly. "What problem?" He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You think being dependable makes you desirable. It doesn't. It makes you replaceable." I froze. "What are you talking about?" He swirled the ice in his glass. "You think saving money, following routines, being safe, that's what makes a man stay no Maya. That makes a man bored." His words hit me harder than I expected. I stood there too tired to fight, too stunned to cry. "I'm working for us," I whispered. "For our future." "Future," he scoffed. "You mean your dull little version of it. The one where we live on a budget and never go anywhere. God, you don't even know what living means." I could smell the alcohol on his breath, sharp and arrogant. "Timothy, stop," I said quietly. But he didn't. He leaned forward, eyes glinting. "You're the kind of woman men settle for when they're done having fun. The reliable backup plan. The one who's there when all the exciting ones leave." My throat tightened. "You don't mean that." He smiled, cold and deliberate. "Don't I?" The room went still. I could hear the hum of the fridge, the faint ticking of the clock. I wanted to scream, to throw his words back at him, to remind him of every time I stayed up helping him prep for a meeting, every time I paid rent, when his freelance checks were late, every time I believed in him more than he believed in himself. But I didn't say a word. I just stood there silent, breathing, burning. And that silence rattled him. He slammed his glass down. "Oh, don't act hurt. You know it's true. You cling to me because you're afraid you'll never do better." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "You think being kind is weakness, Timothy? One day you'll realize it isn't." He smirked. "Yeah, we'll see." I turned away, heart pounding. That night I slept in the guest room. He didn't check on me. He didn't apologize. He just let me drift away quietly like my absence meant nothing. The next morning, I half hoped he'd wake up sober, remorseful. But when I walked into the kitchen, he was laughing on his phone, reading a text. "Morning," I said carefully. He didn't look up. I set a mug in front of him. "Coffee?" He waved it away. "Nah, Chloe showed me this new place downtown. Once you've had real quality, you can't go back to cheap stuff." My chest tightened. "Chloe," he smirked. "A friend." But the way his lips curved told me otherwise. He stood, kissed my forehead like I was a stranger. "Don't wait up tonight," he said. "I might be late." And just like that, he walked out, leaving me in a kitchen that suddenly felt foreign. I sat there staring at the untouched mug of coffee steam, fading into cold air. For the first time in years, I realized something terrifying. The man I loved wasn't just pulling away, he was pushing me down. And maybe he always had been. The next few days felt like walking through fog, thick, heavy, and disorienting. Timothy barely spoke to me, except for small cutting remarks disguised as indifference. He came home later, smelled like perfume that wasn't mine, and carried a confidence that didn't belong to guilt. I tried to convince myself he was just going through a rough patch. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe he'd come back down once the excitement wore off. But deep down, I knew better. It was a Thursday night when the truth finally broke the surface. He stumbled. In late hair, messy shirt, half untucked. Phone glowing in his hand. I was sitting on the couch with a book I hadn't turned a page of in 20 minutes. "Hey," I said softly. "Hey," he replied without looking up. He dropped his keys, poured himself a glass of whiskey, and sat down across from me. Silence. Just the clink of ice and the hum of the fridge. "Rough day?" I asked. He laughed, not bitter this time, but cruel. "You could say that." He leaned back, eyes scanning me like I was a spreadsheet he'd already finished reading. Then he said it the words that would change everything. "You know, men like me need passionate women, Maya, not safe ones." I blinked. Passionate. He nodded, grinning like it was a joke. "Women who live, who take risks, who don't spend every weekend checking price tags and making lists." I felt my throat tighten. "So what, I'm boring now?" He shrugged, pretending to think. "Not boring, just predictable. You're like comfort food. Reliable, familiar, but after a while you crave spice." "Spice," I repeated quietly. "You mean Chloe?" His grin didn't falter. At least she knows how to live. The words landed like shards of glass. Sharp, precise, deliberate. I stood, heart pounding in my ears. So this is what it's about. Her. He chuckled, sipping his drink. Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic. You knew this was coming. We're just different people. No, I said. We're the same people we've always been. You're just bored. He waved his hand lazily. You think I want to spend my life counting coupons and watching reruns. I want excitement, Maya. Adventure. You've built a cage and called it security. I stared at him, at the man I once believed was my partner, and saw nothing but a stranger. You're confusing chaos with freedom, I said quietly. He smirked. You're confusing fear with loyalty. That was it, the final crack. I turned away, tears stinging but unfallen. My voice was calm when I asked, So what are you saying, Timothy? He finished his drink, set the glass down with a click, and said it with chilling ease. I'm saying you'll survive without me, and I'll be better off finding someone who's actually on my level. The silence after that was deafening. I watched him lean back confident, certain he'd broken me. Instead, I walked past him straight into the bedroom. He followed his tone, suddenly annoyed. Oh, come on, don't sulk. You knew this wasn't working. I pulled out a suitcase. The sound of the zipper sliced through the air. What are you doing? He demanded. I didn't look up. Exactly what you told me to, surviving without you. He scoffed, crossing his arms. You're not serious. You don't even have the guts. I folded my clothes neatly, deliberately. You've mistaken quiet for weakness. Maya, he said sharply, voice rising, stop being dramatic. I paused, turned to him, and met his gaze, calm, steady, unflinching. You call me safe, predictable, replaceable, I said. But you're the one who's afraid. Afraid of stillness. Of someone who sees through your noise. He blinked, his smirk faltering for the first time. You told me men like you need passionate women, I continued softly. Then go find one. Just remember, passion burns fast. Stability lasts. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. I zipped the suitcase, closed it, and walked toward the door. Maya, wait, he said. His voice half angry, half nervous. You're not actually leaving. I turned one's hand on the doorknob. Watch me. For the first time, he looked uncertain, like he hadn't expected the fire behind the quiet woman he'd taken for granted. I stepped into the hallway. The air felt cold, heavy, real. He called after me. You'll regret this. You'll come crawling back. Women like you always do. I didn't even turn around. My suitcase wheels clicked against the tiles, echoing down the hall. Each sound was a heartbeat, a goodbye, a declaration. Inside me, something shifted, not brokenness, but release. That night, for the first time in years, I slept soundly. Not because I stopped loving him, but because I finally started loving myself. When I first left Timothy, the silence was suffocating. No arguments, no laughter, no noise at all, just the hum of my old refrigerator and the creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. For years, my life had revolved around us. My schedule, my meals, even my weekends had been shaped by him, what he wanted to eat, where he wanted to go, how he wanted to feel. Now it was just me. The first week, I couldn't even sleep in my own bed. Every shadow felt like a memory. Every quiet second reminded me of the sound of his voice saying, "You're not enough." I kept expecting a text, an apology, something. But nothing came. So I filled the silence myself. I woke up early, even when I didn't need to. I made coffee and actually drank it slowly without rushing to pack lunches or check his messages. I went for walks around the neighborhood, bought groceries for one, started journaling again. It was awkward at first, like learning to breathe through new lungs. Then one morning I saw my reflection while brushing my teeth, and I realized I looked different, not broken, just empty, like a photo that had lost its color. That was the moment I decided to rebuild. I joined a gym, something I used to tease Timothy for doing. The first day was brutal. I couldn't lift much, couldn't run far. My legs ached for days. But every drop of sweat felt like I was rinsing him off my skin. After a few weeks, I started noticing changes. I stood taller, my breathing slowed. My body felt like mine again. At work, my focus sharpened. My boss started trusting me with bigger projects. One evening, after a long presentation, she smiled and said, "You've got this calm confidence I've never noticed before." I smiled back. She had no idea what it had cost to earn that calm. Meanwhile, the world around me kept turning, including Timothy's. I didn't ask about him, but I didn't have to. People talk. Mutual friends mentioned he was seeing Chloe, now the passionate woman he'd compared me to. She was everything I wasn't: loud, impulsive, flirtatious, constantly chasing something new. They posted pictures online, expensive dinners, weekend trips, champagne bottles with captions like, "Find someone who matches your energy." I didn't look for the posts, but they found me anyway. It's strange how the internet delivers heartbreak long after the person's gone. At first, I felt that familiar ache jealousy wrapped in humiliation, but over time, that ache dulled. Their photos looked staged, their smiles too bright, and I couldn't help noticing how desperate it all seemed. I didn't react, I didn't comment, I didn't even block him. My silence became my weapon, and in that stillness, I started to grow again. Months passed. I learned to cook dishes I'd never tried before. I started photography again. Something Timothy once told me was a cute hobby that wouldn't pay the bills. I took my camera out at sunrise, capturing quiet streets before the world woke up, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible behind the lens. Sometimes late at night, I'd think about the things he'd said: replaceable, boring, safe. I used to hate those words. Now, they didn't sting anymore. Safe means I can trust myself. Predictable means I keep my promises. And replaceable, no. There's only one me. A few months later, my phone buzzed during lunch at work. A friend had sent me a screenshot. Chloe had posted something. "Never mistake chaos for passion. Some people will drain you dry and call it love." The comments were filled with sympathy. Timothy wasn't in her photos anymore. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. But I won't lie, I felt something inside me settle, like the universe had just whispered, "See." It wasn't joy, it wasn't revenge, it was confirmation that silence, dignity, and distance can destroy what shouting never could. One evening, as I watered my plants, my phone lit up. No number. "Hey stranger, just checking in." I stared at the message. No name, no apology, just that same smug tone disguised as charm. I locked the screen and placed the phone face down. The next morning, there was another text. "I drove by your old place today. Made me think of you. Hope you're doing okay." I exhaled slowly. For a second, I almost laughed. Because that was the thing about people like Timothy, they always came back. Not because they missed you, but because they missed what you did for them. And this time, I wasn't going to give him a single word. I poured myself coffee, sat by the window, and watched the sunlight spill across my apartment. It looked the same as the morning he told me I was replaceable. Except now I knew the truth. I wasn't the woman who needed him. I was the woman who'd learned how powerful silence can be. Time is funny. It doesn't heal everything, but it does expose what's real. By the time summer rolled around, I hadn't thought about Timothy in weeks. My life had settled into a rhythm that felt peaceful. Mornings with coffee and music instead of arguments. Evenings spent reading or editing photos, not waiting for texts that never came. But the world has a strange way of delivering closure when you least expect it. I ran into Tara, a mutual friend, at a coffee shop one Friday. She hesitated before speaking like someone holding a secret too juicy to keep. "You've heard about Timothy, right?" she asked, lowering her voice. I sipped my latte calm. "No, and I'd prefer to keep it that way." She smiled, unable to help herself. "Well, let's just say karma showed up wearing high heels." I raised an eyebrow, meaning she leaned in. Chloe cleaned him out. Literally. Maxed his credit cards, borrowed money in his name, and disappeared. He's been calling everyone for help. For a moment, I said nothing, just stared at the foam swirling in my cup. Not because I was shocked, but because I wasn't. Tara continued. "He told people she was his soulmate. Now he's saying she ruined his life." I bit back a smile. Sounds like he finally met his match. After that, little updates trickled in. I never asked for them, but they found me anyway. Timothy had lost his job. His landlord evicted him after missed payments. The car he used to brag about the one Chloe loved to pose beside got repossessed. And Chloe she'd moved on within weeks, with a new guy who looked like Timothy's richer twin. The irony was poetic. Meanwhile, my life had blossomed quietly. The promotion I'd been working toward finally came through. My manager called it well-deserved consistency. Those two words, the same ones Timothy once mocked, now felt like a crown. I moved into a brighter apartment downtown, bought a new camera lens, adopted a cat named Juniper who filled my evenings with soft purrs instead of insults. My reflection changed too, not just the outside, but the energy. My posture straighter, my voice calmer, my smile real. It wasn't revenge that made me feel powerful, it was peace. A few weeks later it happened, a message from Timothy. "Timothy, hey, just checking in. You look amazing, by the way." I stared at the screen for a moment, then locked it. But curiosity, or maybe old habit, got the better of me. I checked his profile. He looked different. Thinner. Paler. the confident grin replaced by something brittle. His photos were quiet now, no flashy dinners, no Chloe, just grainy selfies captioned with new beginnings and learning to focus on myself. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But pity wasn't love. It was closure in disguise. 2 nights later, my phone rang. His name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Maya, he said too quickly. Wow, I wasn't sure you'd pick up. I kept my voice steady. You got 2 minutes. He laughed awkwardly. Fair. Look, I know I messed things up. But you were always different. You cared. You made me better. I closed my eyes, listening to the irony. He didn't sound sincere. He sounded lonely. I'm not calling to rehash old things I said. If you need closure, you already have it. I walked away. He sighed. You don't even want to hear me out. I don't need to. You made your choice, Timothy, and I made mine. There was silence. Then his voice cracked just a little. Chloe. She wasn't what I thought she was. I cut him off. Stop. Don't use me to clean up your regrets. Maya, please, Click. I hung up. The sound was final clean, like a door locking from the inside. For the first time in years, I didn't cry after hearing his voice. I didn't even shake. I just sat there watching the city lights outside my window, realizing how far I'd come. He used to tell me I was too cautious, too careful, too safe. But maybe that's exactly why I survived him. A week later, Tara sent me another message. Guess who showed up at the gym today looking for you? I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because I already knew. When karma finally wears expensive perfume, it doesn't come to gloat. It just passes by softly reminding you you don't need revenge when you already have peace. That night, I journaled for the first time in months. Sometimes losing someone isn't punishment. It's preparation for the woman you're meant to become. I closed the book and smiled. For the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. It happened on a Tuesday evening. Ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of night you almost forget the moment it ends. I'd just finished a long day at work, stopped by a bookstore, and was halfway through a cup of tea when my phone started buzzing. Timothy. For a moment, I just stared at his name glowing on the screen. It had been nearly 8 months since I walked out of that apartment. 8 months since I decided silence was louder than pleading. I shouldn't have answered, but curiosity is a stubborn ghost. Hello, I said, my tone neutral. There was a pause, then his voice soft, too careful. Maya. Wow. You picked up. 2 minutes, I reminded him. That's all you get. He gave a small laugh, the kind that once melted me. But now it sounded rehearsed. Still direct, I see. Still busy, I replied. He exhaled loudly like he'd been holding his breath for months. Look, I know I don't deserve to call. I know I screwed up, but I needed to talk to you. I said nothing. Let the silence press against him. He continued, his voice cracking just enough to sound human again. Chloe, she wasn't what I thought. She drained me, lied, used me. I lost everything. My job, my savings. I even had to move back with my brother for a while. I didn't flinch. He was waiting for pity, but all I felt was distance, the kind that no apology can close. He went on. I keep thinking about how good things were with you. You were steady, kind, patient. You always had my back. I didn't see it then, but you were the one thing that actually worked in my life. Worked, I repeated. That's an interesting word to use for love. He hesitated. I mean, you know what I mean. You were good for me. You kept me grounded. I miss that. I miss you. I took a breath, steady and slow. You don't miss me, Timothy. You miss control. You miss stability, the kind you didn't have to earn. He went quiet, then softer. You sound different. I am different, I said. I finally stopped apologizing for being the woman you couldn't handle. He sighed, almost in disbelief. So that's it. You're just done. Timothy, I said, my voice calm but final. I was done the night you told me men like you needed passionate women. I realized then that you didn't want love. You wanted an audience. He tried again, desperate this time. Can't we at least talk? Maybe dinner. One chance to... No. The silence that followed was long and sharp. I could almost hear him blinking in shock. Maya, he said finally. Don't you even care that I've been struggling? I let out a quiet laugh, not cruel, just tired. Care. You didn't care when I begged for your respect. Why should I care now? He muttered something under his breath. You've changed. I had to. Then I hung up. For days after I felt nothing, no guilt, no sadness, no triumph, just stillness, like closing a door on a room I'd already cleaned. But the world, as always, has its sense of timing. 2 weeks later, I saw him again. It was at my gym of all places. I'd just finished my workout wiping sweat from my neck when I spotted him near the entrance. He looked smaller somehow, his shoulders slumped, his confidence deflated. Maya, he said softly, almost like he was afraid I'd vanish. I froze, not because I still felt anything, but because I realized in that moment I truly didn't. He walked closer, forcing a smile. Wow, you've changed. I told you I did. His eyes flickered over me, the athletic frame, the quiet poise, the peace he could never give me. You look amazing, he said. Healthier, happier. I am, he swallowed. Listen, I know I said horrible things. I was arrogant. I thought I wanted excitement, but Chloe, she was a nightmare. You were everything I didn't appreciate. Can't we just start over? I met his gaze steady and unflinching. No, Timothy, we can't. He blinked like he hadn't expected the answer to come so quickly. Why not, he asked. Because the woman you hurt doesn't exist anymore. He looked confused. What does that mean? It means the version of me who waited up for you, who made excuses for your cruelty, who believed your words over her own instincts, she's gone. You killed her the night you called her replaceable. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I picked up my gym bag and stepped closer, lowering my voice. You told me men like you needed passionate women. You were right. You just didn't realize passion isn't chaos. It's strength. And I've found mine. Then I walked past him, no glance back, no hesitation. Behind me I heard him whisper, "You'll regret this." But his voice trembled, and for the first time I knew he didn't believe it either. That night, I sat on my balcony with Juniper curled up beside me, the city lights stretching far and endless. I thought about how many times I'd waited for this, an apology, a reckoning, a moment of regret, and now that it had come, it didn't feel like victory, it felt like peace. Because real revenge isn't making someone miss you. It's becoming someone they'll never deserve again. 6 months passed, long enough for old wounds to turn into faint scars. By then, Timothy had become a name I barely thought about, not because I'd forgiven him, but because he no longer mattered. My world had color again. The morning smelled of freshly brewed coffee and wet soil from the balcony plants. My photography business, something he once called a silly dream, had started picking up clients. Weekends were no longer about keeping someone else happy. They were mine. Then came the wedding invitation. A mutual friend, Olivia, was getting engaged, and she insisted I come. I hesitated at first. Olivia was close to both of us back then. If Timothy showed up, the air would shift. But after everything, I wasn't the one who needed to hide. So I went. The evening was soft and golden, the kind of light that flatters even broken hearts. I wore a simple navy dress, hair pinned loosely, no statement jewelry. I didn't need decoration to feel strong. The moment I stepped into the hall, I felt eyes turn. Familiar faces, half-remembered smiles, whispers like ripples. And then, him. Timothy. He was standing near the bar nursing a drink, laughing too loudly at a joke that wasn't funny. He looked older, not in years, but in weight. The kind of heaviness that comes from running too long in the wrong direction. When he saw me, the laughter caught in his throat. His eyes widened, and for a second I saw the flash of something like regret or disbelief. He walked over, trying to compose himself. Maya. Timothy. You look... He stopped, searching for a word that didn't sound pathetic. Incredible. Thank you, I said, tone polite but distant. He hesitated. Can we talk? I almost said no, but then I realized I didn't owe him fear anymore. Sure, I said. 5 minutes. We stepped out onto the terrace where the air was cooler, the city stretching out below us like a quiet witness. He shoved his hands in his pockets. You really changed. I told you I would. He nodded slowly. I see that. You seem stronger, happier. I am both. He stared down at his shoes, then back at me. Is there someone new? There it was, the question he'd really come for. I smiled. There is. His jaw tightened, eyes flickering with jealousy. Who is he? I met his gaze calm and steady. Me. He blinked, not understanding. I fell in love again. I continued softly, but this time with the one person you made me forget about myself. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The silence between us was thick, final. I stepped closer, just enough for my voice to carry. You told me once that men like you needed passionate women. You made me believe I wasn't enough. But you were wrong, Timothy. I wasn't too little, I was too much for your limits. His lips parted a faint whisper of Maya, but I stopped him. No, I said gently. You don't get to say my name like that anymore. You had the best version of me and mistook her patience for weakness. You called me replaceable, but the truth is, you'll spend the rest of your life trying to find another me, and you never will. The wind picked up, brushing a loose strand of hair across my cheek. I tucked it behind my ear, smiled, not with bitterness, but freedom. I hope you find peace someday, I said quietly, but it won't be with me. Then I turned and walked away. As I re-entered the hall, Olivia caught my hand. Are you okay? I nodded, smiling genuinely. I'm perfect. And I was. Because strength isn't in the confrontation. It's in the calm that follows it. Later that night, as I left the party, I glanced over my shoulder, once not to look for him, but to remind myself that I no longer needed to. The woman who once begged for his love was gone. The woman walking out into the night was untouchable. He once told me I wasn't woman enough for his needs. Turns out I was more woman than he could ever handle. Some people are meant to break you, not to destroy you, but to rebuild you into something stronger. I don't hate him anymore. I just thank him for showing me exactly who I'll never be again. The camera pans upward, the city lights glowing like small stars against the dark. Maya walks away, her heels clicking against the pavement, head high, eyes forward. No tears, no hesitation, just freedom.